This is the Open University.
I have never been to university, but there's one thing I love to see. The Open University of Mr. Momus.
Welcome back to the Open University, which is not the real Open University. I'm back in Paris, and I wanted to tell you about my trip to Italy. Already showed some episodes of the early parts of that trip from Berlin to Prague and then Prague to Vienna, and the whole point of it really was to see the Venice Biennale. And you'll never believe what happened in Venice on a gondola, but we'll get to that in a minute. Clickbait. So just before taking the trains towards Venice, we actually were up in the German countryside, just north of Berlin, a place called Gerswalde, talking to a Korean friend, Jongwa, who had just come back from Venice and seen the exhibition and said it was, although it had been panned, she said, she really liked it because it was collectives, it was crafts, it was foreigners, immigrants, expatriates, and anonymous artists and underrepresented artists, and she found particularly the sort of craft side of it interesting and the collective side of it, and she said it was actually better for that reason than the usual kind of professional artists biennial, and I think I agree with that. Having seen it, I think you could say if you wanted to sketch the history of exhibitions of contemporary art in the 20th century, there were the modernists, the big blockbuster exhibitions of Picasso and people like that, Duchamp, and then you got the epigones, I call them, the lesser followers of these people. So you get Jeff Koons, or you get Damien Hirst, sort of re-molding the ideas of these titans of modernism. Then you'd start to get, towards the end of the 90s or so, you'd start to get exhibitions in which the curators were retreading the same history but looking at peripheral modernisms, maybe the Japanese or Brazilian modernism figures, and then you'd get increasingly didactic and guilty exhibitions which would be decolonial, post-colonial, expressing remorse for the Western history of imperialism and colonialism. And of course that can get a bit tedious, but you have to remember that this idea of the foreigner, the immigrant, the diasporic character, the exile, the refugee, the expatriate, it's still a really important idea. It's in this Arsenale part of the Venice Biennale, it's a curator called Adriano Pedrosa, who's from Sao Paulo. He curates the Museo de Arte there, and he's called it Foreigners Everywhere, which is a kind of double-edged sword, because it's a kind of almost a racist slogan. It's the kind of slogan that's powering the kind of populism that we're all suffering from at the moment, or all excited by, some of us, I guess. So I was a little worried that this, like the previous exhibitions we saw in the last 5 years or so, the Documenta, the Berlin Biennial, the previous Venice Biennale, it would be a little bit harping on the same themes, and also it would be framed by the right wing. So the alternative reading of Foreigners Everywhere is that we're all foreigners. We can all identify with this outsider figure, those of us who go to exhibitions anyway. But I was worried that you'd walk around this and you'd kind of say, well, I was anti-immigrant before, and now I'm even more anti-immigrant. So it becomes like the negation of the negation. And that's a framing that belongs to the unfortunately large number of people who are thinking in terms of nationalism and indigenous, superiority, the purity of the master races of their own individual countries. It is important for that reason, unfortunately, as a kind of antithesis to the thesis of racism. It's important to me personally as a theme because I've always dealt in Momus songs with foreigners and outsiders, adulterers, third parties, homosexuals. So the Adriano Pedrosa is actually claiming that he's enfolding this idea of being an exile or an immigrant or a refugee into queerness, because to be queer is to be a stranger, and it's to be a stranger in your own land, and it's to be strange in general. And he's also then trying to a little bit square the circle, saying that indigenous artists or collectives of artists whose names are often even unknown, or outsider artists, are treated as foreigners in their own lands as well. I'm not sure if that's entirely true, because it's often a tribal process to generate this kind of collective art, and it's often very central to traditional societies anyway, but I guess in a capitalist world, those traditional practices are pushed to the margins as well. So I thought this was, visually very exciting, and there were a lot of art, of course, a lot of non-professional artists and, people you'd never heard of from Pakistan, a painter that Naomi and I both liked, who painted green paintings of scenes in Pakistan. All sorts of, the American Pavilion in the Giardini being an indigenous Native American who's also queer, so very much on theme. Of course, there's a kind of guilt washing, what shall we call it, when it comes to the Giardini, which is national pavilions, national governments paying for artists to go there. It's kind of most extremely visible in the Israeli pavilion, in which the curators and the artists decided not to even open the pavilion while the war was happening. I'm always also interested in sound and music when I come to these biennials, and I kind of see, because it's the oldest cultural exhibition in the world, the Venice Biennale, and it gets almost 1 million visitors, but in the months that it's open. I kind of feel like it resets my cultural watch. It's one way of paying attention to what's going on in the world and what people are thinking and what people would like the world to look more like in some ways as well. But also, just very specifically, I'm exposed to things which I wouldn't otherwise find, and it's often sound. So Diego Marcon, for instance, who was one of the people I liked in the last Venice Biennale, who made a very cynical kind of murder ballad about a man who killed his whole family and turned it into a little operetta. He was back this year, not in the official Biennale, but actually in an off-site location of video art, with a new piece which is just a little boy hanging, swinging in the wind, having hanged himself or been hanged. It's not really clear which, with very gentle music playing. A little bit disappointing, not as impressive as his last piece. There was also a great piece by Well Shawkey, which turned into almost like a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta, the history of the colonization of Egypt, the way the British kind of tricked the Egyptians by signing trade deals and pacts and things with them, which they then invoked acts of God to break. So, and musically very, very interesting. Pretty much anywhere there was like an installation, there was interesting music. It was never pop music, obviously. It was often minimalist kind of contemporary classical music, or it was traditional music, or it was strangely soothing installation music. The Japanese pavilion, for instance, was the sound of rotting fruit generated by the decay itself. And the German pavilion had a whole installation which was about Turkish workers being exposed to asbestos dust in asbestos mines, with specific case histories of people who'd died prematurely of exposure to asbestos. That kind of thing, and I find it musically Or there was a beautiful piece actually in one of the Italian pavilions in the Arsenale of huge organ pipes. I mean, really massive. Some of them so huge that the notes that they produced with air being pumped through them in a kind of scaffolding was so low that you could only feel the vibration of the note. You couldn't actually hear it. So this kind of thing, it always kind of feeds into my next record because it seems important to me. It seems like it's a great gathering point for people thinking about, you know, about life and about music and about art, about vision. And you cram really well. I mean, sometimes I've done like the Arsenale and the Giardini in one day, but that's kind of crazy. This time I did the Arsenale. We did the Arsenale in the first day. The second day we did the Giardini, which begins with a very strange pavilion, Spain, which was the only really failed pavilion as far as I could see, in which they'd gathered art made by immigrants, but it kind of was really clunkily presented with very dim lighting, and it just felt like a strange museum somewhere in a little town. But then some really great pavilions after that, Belgium, the Netherlands. Belgium was particularly great. It was like a kind of weird carnival, Sfansa, I think it's called, which is the Belgian grotesque carnivals with huge carved figures, and also sort of performative publishing, a Flemish newspaper, which they were printing on site and you could take away with you. And Germany was good. A lot of video, so you really had to take your time going through all these locations, these pavilions. Egypt, very good. Greece was good, a nice installation in the Greek pavilion, and so on and so on. So we wended our way back through Switzerland, back to France, and I kind of feel, you know, as usual, quite stocked up with excitement for making sound in a way that's not immediately commercial, which is kind of what Momus is all about. And that's the story so far. Thank you for watching. Oh, someone's at the door.
This is not the real Open University. This is the Momus Open University. A synthetic Open University. A random series of talks by Momus, the gaunt minstrel of modern angst.